my gosh, it's the wrong time. It's 7 o'clock Eastern on Sunday, and it's 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for coming an hour later. Oh my gosh, what a day.
It's toilet paper math day and time warp day.
That's right, because
everything is off by 1 hour.
6 regular hours and equals 7 mega hours.
And 1 toilet paper roll.
So we owe all of our devoted live listeners an apology, but we are running an hour later than usual.
One of our sponsors wanted to selfishly keep us at this one event.
That's right. We were celebrating a socially distant birthday. Mm-hmm. There will be pictures online.
There will be.
Including the hug shield.
Mm-hmm. Including some videos.
So special thanks to Mark, one of our longest term Patreon subscriber.
Thank you, Mark,
for making that possible.
Yes.
And thank you to the rest of you for waiting for us.
Yes.
It's been a hard scrabble day.
Yeah, it's an adventure.
Be prepared for an exciting, or at least interesting podcast.
Yes.
Happy Sunday, friends and lovers, and welcome to 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir. And today is May 31st, 2020.
Yes.
And it is the 152nd day of the year. With 214 days remaining, that means 2020 is less than half over. Mm. And as our good friend Caton pointed out, the best is yet to come. Mm-hmm. He mentioned this after discussing the SpaceX launch yesterday.
Yeah.
How awesome was that?
Fantastic.
Answer all the way awesome.
Yes.
As awesome as it gets.
Those spacesuits were just beautiful. They were artwork.
Yeah, the guys are looking stylish. None of that old kludgy NASA stuff. No, this is what you only get from a private, or at least a private-public partnership. Mm-hmm. So good job, Elon Musk. Yes. Whatever my criticisms of you are, and there's a list, that was, again, awesome.
That was pretty nice.
And this time, awesome is the right word.
Yes.
So today is the 152nd day of the year, 208 days until Christmas. Mm-hmm. 153 days until Halloween.
Excellent.
And on this date, May 31st, in 1859, mm-hmm. Big Ben rang for the first time.
Lovely.
Big Ben rings out over London. The famous clock tower known as Big Ben, located at the top of the 320-foot-high Elizabeth Tower, rings over the Houses of Parliament. After a fire destroyed much of the Palace of Westminster, the headquarters of the British Parliament, in October of 1834, a standout feature of the design for a new palace was a large clock atop a tower. The royal astronomer Sir George Airy wanted the clock to have a pinpoint accuracy, including twice-a-day checks with the Royal Greenwich Observatory. Many clockmakers at the time dismissed the goal as impossible. Airy counted on the help of Edmund Beckett Denison, a formidable barrister known for his expertise in horology, or the science of measuring time.
Huh. I didn't know that they had a word.
Even after an incendiary bomb destroyed the chamber of the House of Commons during the Second World War, the Elizabeth Tower survived, and Big Ben continued to function. So, happy birthday, Big Ben.
Happy birthday, Big Ben.
And happy birthday to all of our viewers in England. Today, incidentally, is National Smile Day.
Oh, is it?
Well, it's a Hallmark holiday. It was started by a dentist's office. But if ever there was a worthy Hallmark holiday, mm-hmm. National Smile Day would have to be it. So if you're not smiling now, make it happen.
Yes. It's good to smile.
That's right. So what are we listening to this week?
What are we listening to this week?
Our recommended podcast for the week
comes from me.
I had a different vote. Amy's was much better.
Thank you.
Amy's recommended podcast for the week is Happier with Gretchen Rubin. I've listened to this podcast before. It's in my subscriptions list. Yeah. I just have strayed from it, and Amy has reminded me I need to get back to that.
Yeah, I read Gretchen Rubin's book, The Happiness Project, or Why I Spend a Year Trying to Sing in the Morning, Clean My Closets, Fight Right, Read Aristotle, and generally have more fun. Yeah. And it's a very good book.
I kind of read the book. Mm-hmm. I read it on Audible. Which I guess these days is the same thing, but I'm old and fuddy-duddy enough that I make that distinction.
Yeah.
People tell me they read a book, and then I find out, oh, actually they listened to it while they were doing yard work. I guess that's the same as reading the book.
Not really.
Yeah. What I haven't read yet, though, is her book, The Four Tendencies, the indispensable personality profiles that reveal how to make your life better and other people's lives better, too.
Yeah, it's a pretty good idea. Yeah.
It's yet another set of categories by which you can categorize yourself, and it's useful because it does give you strategies for managing challenges around your own personality.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
And it's good to know thyself. And that's the first tenet in philosophy by Socrates.
So Gretchen Rubin is worth looking into. The podcast, again, is Happier with Gretchen Rubin. The New York Times called her the queen of the self-help memoir. Okay.
But she said, I would say that my work is self-helpful, not self-help. Really, I'd say that I'm a moral essayist, but that sounds so dull. Well, honestly, actually, moral essayist sounds exciting to me.
Yeah, moral essayist dull?
No.
Pshaw, Gretchen.
It's good stuff.
But definitely worth listening to,
Yes.
and also the book, The Happiness Project, worth reading. It's funny because I expected something more akin to The Year of Living Biblically by Jacob. Forgot his name. Look it up. You'll find it.
Yes.
But that was much more humor with a point being made on the sly.
Yes.
The Happiness Project is much more straightforward. Read it. Well, if you want to be happy. If you don't want to be happy, don't
No,
read
you
it.
don't have to be happy if you don't really want to.
That's right.
But the podcast is Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
That's right.
Happier.
What we're listening to this week, besides that, Leonard Peikoff's talk, Volition as a Means of Clarity. Worth listening to because of the identification he makes, and HarryBinswanger does this later as well, that thought is integration. And integration is hierarchy. And the point is that volition isn't just deciding to think, but deciding to integrate. So as you can guess, given the promotions for this week's podcast and what we just talked about,
Yes.
the word for the day is volition, and our theme is free will.
Volition means free will, basically.
Yes, volition means, according to Leonard Peikoff, volitional means selected from two or more alternatives that were possible under the circumstances. The difference being made by the individual's decision, which could have been different.
So that means a person is confronted with a choice between one or the other.
Yes. More fundamentally, the person is confronted with the choice to even think about the choice or
Yes.
not, to engage their mind, to focus or not.
Or even accept that they do have a choice. Or
Yes.
be aware of that
Funny you should mention
power that they have.
that, because free will is axiomatic.
Axiomatic.
You can't get around it. You have to assume it, even to talk about it.
No, that's
So it would sound like, well, nobody could possibly believe that they don't have free will. And yet, we're surrounded by them. They're in the newspapers, they're in the books,
Yes.
they're in podcasts, they're everywhere.
So you're saying that everybody, despite even if they deny it, has an ability and actually does choose between two different alternatives all the time?
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even if they deny it.
Even if they deny it, yes. Yes. So you would think, who on earth could believe that? Well, one example that I can't resist bringing up is Sam Harris. And I've talked about him before, I've posted about him before, but especially interesting and insightful and amusing to me is his article on free will and the reality of love. Somehow, Sam Harris, who is a determinist, who believes we don't have free will, that we don't have choice, that everything that we do is metaphysically determined,
Well, good for him.
believes in love, but he doesn't believe in hate.
Does he believe in fear? Does he believe in any negative emotion? I wonder.
Well, he believes that emotions exist.
Oh, do they?
But hate in particular is an evaluation of somebody having done the wrong thing when he could have done otherwise, and nobody could do otherwise. Here, I'll quote a brief passage from his article, Free Will and the Reality of Love. This is Sam Harris. What many people seem to be missing is the positive side of these truths, the truth of determinism. Seeing through the illusion of free will does not undercut the reality of love, for example, because loving other people is not a matter of fixating on the underlying causes of their behavior. Rather, it is a matter of caring about them as people and enjoying their company. We want those we love to be happy, and we want to feel the way we feel in their presence. The difference between happiness and suffering does not depend on free will. Indeed, it has no logical relationship to it. But then nothing does, because the very idea of free will makes no sense. In loving others and in seeking happiness ourselves, we are primarily concerned with the character of conscious experience. Now, one more real quick. Hatred, however, is powerfully governed by the illusion that those we hate could and should behave differently. We don't hate storms, avalanches, mosquitoes, or the flu. This, incidentally, was written well before the pandemic. I kind of hate the flu. We might use the term hatred to describe our aversion to suffering, the suffering these things cause us. But we are prone to hate other human beings in a very different sense. True hatred requires that we view our enemy as the ultimate author of his thoughts and actions. Now get this. True hatred requires that we view our enemy as the ultimate author of his thoughts and actions. Love demands only that we care about our friends and find happiness in their company. It may be hard to see the truth in this at first, but I encourage everyone to keep looking. It is one of the more beautiful asymmetries to be found anywhere. Now that, I'm doing air quotes if you're just listening to the audio. If you believe that beautiful asymmetry is an interesting identification, it is interesting, but it's not an identification. This idea that you can hate people only because you think they could have done other than what they did, but you can love people just because you love them. What does that do to the forget about the hatred and the idea that nobody's responsible for what they do. What does that do to love?
Right. It makes it non-causal.
Yes.
It doesn't give any...
And unearned. This is James Taggart.
Right.
This is Cheryl saying, well, you want it to be causeless. You don't want to be loved for anything.
Right.
Now, I shouldn't psychologize, but if this is not an instance of motivated thinking, of knowing what you want your conclusion to be and then figuring out how to scrape your way into it, I don't know what is.
It sounds like Sam Harris is just a sad person. I know. Sometimes he's good to listen to, but...
Yes.
I ain't got no time for that.
That's right. Life's too short. This podcast is too short. We only have 5 minutes. So, if free will is the power, per Leonard Peikoff, to decide among two or more alternatives, where is free will?
Where is it? It's right here. Got it. I just grasped the air and found it and grabbed it. Oh,
this is smart water.
It's intelligent.
Overpriced water.
You're very, very smart.
I may choose to explain that one later. Where is free will?
Yes.
So here I call on Ayn Rand, who observed, quote, that which you call your soul, your spirit, is your consciousness. And that which you call your free will is your mind's freedom to think or not. The only will you have. Your only freedom. The choice that controls all the choices you make and determines your life and character. See, free will is your choice to engage your mind or not.
Yes.
Now, how that plays out is you choose to focus, and consequently you choose to integrate. You choose to look at all the facts that integrate with what you're aware of in the moment.
So what you're trying to say is that you contemplate what your thoughts are in your mind, and you introspect, and you
Well,
think
more
about
than
other
that.
concepts that
Yes, you follow them where they lead.
yes.
You let the chips fall where they may, in your own thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an interesting identification, because a lot of people talk about free will as, well, if it's the choice to focus or not, then as long as I'm not evading, as long as I'm willing to keep my eyes open and think, that's enough. Peikoff and Binswanger make the point that, well, that's just the start. But the way it actually occurs in reality is you open your eyes, you focus, and then you follow your thoughts where they lead.
Mm-hmm.
Or you direct their thoughts where they should lead. You integrate
That's a lot of things that you're saying there, Robert.
many things. And I didn't mean to get too
Many
technical, because we're not
things.
going to get into the technical part of this.
What? There's more?
But the reason I ask regarding free will, where is it at, is because we all too often think of choice in terms of effects. I'm going to choose, should I go to Paris? Should I decide to work
Yes.
out every day?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And these take place a few steps beyond that. And if you want to get to Paris, or you want to work out every day, if you understand that choice to focus, in other words, that bit that requires willpower,
Yeah. Oh,
that
willpower.
requires effort, that bit that requires a certain amount of psychic energy,
Yeah.
not psychic energy, but psychological energy,
Right.
psychic energy.
That's what this show is about.
The key to bridging that gap
Mm-hmm.
between willpower and, oh, I'll get out of bed and I'll go work out,
Right.
or, oh, I'll go take the money out of the bank to go to Paris, and actually doing the complex thing that you want to do, is understanding that integration is what gets you there.
Okay.
Because willpower is limited. You can't just will yourself to do the right thing if you don't know it's the right thing.
Right.
You can't just will yourself to change if you don't fully understand the change, understand your motivation for the change, understand your path toward the change.
So willpower isn't some sort of, or free will isn't some kind of superpower that magically circumvents your nature, and where you will yourself to do anything, like fly or something.
Right.
It's actually there's a specific nature to it.
But even where you will yourself to become a great piano player.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about the water. Birthday party. I'll explain.
Yes, he will explain.
So we can understand those complex things as being directed by three elements.
Mm-hmm.
This was brought up on Facebook recently by several people, Mark Monroe in particular.
Oh, thank you, Mark Monroe.
And I've ranted about this in the past to all of the Great Lakes objectivists who have had to put up with me saying this over and over again. But you are the product, or rather, you are the combination or the result of three factors, two of which even Sam Harris would believe in:
Oh,
nature and nurture,
okay.
or what you is and what you've been through,
Okay.
or your psychology and your philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
But the third element, without which none of what you are and what you do can be explained by nature and nurture, is what you choose to do, given what you are and what you've been through, given your
Oh.
nature and your nurture. You are a combination of three things: your physical state, your psychological state, and your choices.
Well put.
So knowing that choice operates at the level of focus can give you enormous power in addressing the physical and the psychological, or the philosophical and the psychological.
Mm-hmm.
Our results are a product of what we are, our nature, what we've been through, or our nurture, and what we choose to do about it, our will. And this is why I love Post-it notes. I love aphorisms. This is why good strategies and parables and motivational techniques, this is why those things actually work. This is why self-help actually works.
Is it self-helpful?
It is self-helpful.
Yes.
It is selfish helpful.
Selfish helpful.
So a lot of the advice that I've given in past episodes is shaped by the motivational speakers and the psychological speakers and philosophical essays, and is useful in bridging that gap between, again, what you are and what you've faced in the past and where you want to be.
Right.
And in future episodes, we'll be honing this idea of what is that path between waking up in the morning and making the choice to focus and achieving a complex or at least a time requiring effect, getting from a decision to a result.
Okay.
Like Anthony Robbins, for example, says, you should never leave the site of a decision without taking at least one step in the direction of the result you seek. Actually, several people say that.
Yeah, start with one thing and go from there.
That's right.
Gain momentum.
Because if two frogs are sitting on a log, I think it was Robert Ian who said that. Actually, everybody's said that. Whenever I give a name, it's probably this guy said something everybody else has said before him, back to Napoleon Hill and back to Thomas Paine and probably back to Aristotle.
So there's no reason to ascribe anything to anybody. Okay.
Don't ascribe don't give anybody. Well, when I give credit to people, just realize I'm not saying he's the first guy who said that.
Okay.
The first gal who said that.
First person.
What a sexist I am.
First human being.
The first entity.
First conceptual entity.
Yes. And if two frogs are sitting on a log and one of the frogs decides to jump off,
Uh-huh.
how many frogs are on the log?
One.
I'm just watching the steps, the comments, because somebody's going to answer that one. Two frogs are sitting on a log. One of them frogs should decide to jump off.
Uh-huh.
How many frogs are left on the log?
Anybody? There's a delay, you know.
Oh, yeah, there is. And the answer is, well, there's one frog on the log, because deciding to jump off the log and jumping off the log are two completely different things. See, if you're a motivational guy, you have to say it in that kind of tone. They're two completely different. Like, I'm going to hammer this into your head because you're not bright enough to. I want you to really have that aha moment.
There's 3 steps to happiness.
I love motivational speakers, but I also rip on them because after a while, the techniques that make them effective become so transparent they're not as effective. But in any event, yes. That's why Mel Robbins has the 5-second rule.
Okay.
And the 5-second rule is willpower rather is limited. So when you make a decision, when you make a plan, when you've decided something, you have 5 seconds to actually do something about it. Because if you let more than 5 seconds go by, the odds are you ain't going to do it. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and then you'll feel sad about it.
So there's one of your tips. Use that. Use the 5-second rule. She's got a book. You can read the book. You don't need to read the book.
Okay.
Listen to one of her lectures or just listen to me. Remember the 5-second rule. You will not follow through on a resolution if you give it more than 5. This is if you go to buy an automobile. If you go to buy an automobile, one of the tricks in buying a car in a showroom from a salesman is be willing to walk out the door.
Yeah.
You will never get the best deal if you buy the car the same day you walked in the door and test drove it. Be willing to walk out the door. Your salesman will fight you on that. Why will your salesman fight you on that?
He'll punch you in the face.
Well, no, well, yeah, he will. At least metaphorically.
Yeah.
He will give you, people, and all sorts of salespeople, window salespeople are the worst at this. Home improvement, oh my gosh. If you are not willing to sign a contract the day that they talk to you, we have had them throw their papers in their briefcase and walk out the door without saying goodbye.
Goodbye.
As soon as, well, no, we're not going to take that 98% discount that you're offering us if we're willing to sign today.
Right.
We'd gladly pay 20,000 times more as long as we can give you the answer tomorrow.
That's just poor salesmanship if somebody's huffy about it.
But here's the thing. They know, for example, the car salesman knows, if you walk out the door, 95% chance you ain't coming back.
Okay.
They know that. They know that if they don't get you to buy while you're there. Anyway, that's a bit of a distraction, but remember that if you go to buy a new car, be willing to walk out the door, otherwise you're not the one controlling that transaction, somebody else is. And if you found the car you want, be willing to walk back in the door. the next day and say, I'm interested in that vehicle, and then throw the numbers at them you're willing, and then don't budge. Works every time it's tried. So the 5-second rule is, when you make a decision, or when you're confronted with something where action is required, take action within 5 seconds. It's too easy after 5 seconds for it not to happen. Willpower is a limited thing, so don't count on willpower any more than necessary.
Yeah.
Like everything, it's finite.
Right. Unless you're coming up against something that is very, very extremely important decision, you know, I mean, and taking action doesn't necessarily mean, oh, the whole shebang is here. You know, oh, I have my business plan in 5 seconds. No, it's just starting it. Right? Right. You have a lot of notes. Robert has a lot of notes.
Oh, well, some of these are random notes.
Oh, okay.
So for example, if you're so smart, why aren't you rich? Well, obviously that's a random note. If you're so right, for example, all you objectivists, if you're so right, why aren't you rich? Or better, why aren't you happy?
Right.
It's a really annoying question because there are 3 elements controlling your results. What are they? Your nature, your nurture, your choices.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some people have been through stuff, man.
Yeah.
People have been, their nature is such that they've got, handicaps other people don't have.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's, they don't all have my stunning good looks or, my anyway. And some people psychologically have been through heck and back.
Yeah.
We wouldn't know anything about that, having had completely functional childhoods, but some people. The reason I wrote this down is a lot of times when I talk about psychology, and especially about motivational psychology, I always want to give, if I'm being really belligerent, a warning ahead of time, which is some people are going through stuff, and if you give them the drill sergeant routine, we've talked about this before, they can shut down or they can be hurt, and you don't want that to happen. If you're in a position where some of this stuff doesn't apply or it's really, really hard, I'm not judging you. Lord knows I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Methods for mitigating the fact that statements can be empowering and inspiring to some, while simultaneously disempowering and hurtful to others.
Mm-hmm.
That's something to think about if you're on the social networks or if you're on planet Earth, which is, if you say something really inspiring to the wrong person, it might instead be really hurtful.
Right.
So I hope you know my heart's in the right place, and I'm not telling you, if you focus better, you'd be rich by now, you idiot.
No.
That was not the point.
Yeah. So okay, can you summarize what you've been saying here? Because it's you've gone through quite a bit.
Well, let me see if I can't do that. My whole point is we are driving on the margin between nature and nurture.
Mm-hmm.
And I tend to think of that as the 3%, that 48.5% of you is what you are and 48.5% of you is what you've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And if I did the math right, 3% of you is actually driving this bus. And in any given moment, you want to be aware of what you are, what you've been through, and how you can take that into account to get what you want.
All right. So not only take stock of who you are, what you've been through, and basically the idea is you need to take inventory. First of all, you need to know yourself. You need to know what you've been through, how that's affected you psychologically, and who you are. What kind of person are you? What kind of disposition do you have in life? And
yes.
and even in terms of your own intelligence, your own empowerment. What can you do? Some
yes.
people, I'm not. For me, I am. Truth be told, I am not a member of Mensa. Somebody is out there somewhere.
Well, you've never been tested.
Well, no, I don't really want to be. but yeah, I mean, you have to do what you can with what you have. And that includes all of these facets of your life, but you can still make choices around them.
Yes. Now, one of the connections I make, which probably isn't obvious, but we talked about Greg Salmieri's talk on personal values, and we've talked about optional values before.
Yeah.
What we didn't mention last week when we talked about that, and probably should have, was the copper pot story.
Yes. That's a great story.
Because your optional or personal values, which you should seek to understand more deeply, as we've said, morality isn't a scarecrow waving a stick at your values to chase them away. Greg makes this point. If you have values, you're not trying to study them deeper in order to find out you are wrong. You're trying to enhance your appreciation of them. You may occasionally change your mind about something by studying it, but you don't throw away your music collection because you decided rock and roll is immoral.
Right.
The copper pot story is a great example of that. In the book Facets of Ayn Rand, Marianne Suries tells the story about a lunch she was having with Ayn Rand. And she had a conversation with her. She had asked if she could talk to her about something. Some friends of hers had said some very, very hurtful things about a copper pot. And specifically, Marianne Suries liked polishing it. She liked her kitchen a certain way, and she particularly liked this particular item.
Copper pot.
It was a copper pot. It was a beautiful copper pot. And her friends had chastised her for holding a value that was so non-intellectual. And
those cretins.
I couldn't give you all the details, and you should read the book, Facets of Ayn Rand.
Yeah.
But Ayn Rand told her that she explained to her why that was a reasonable value to have. It was interesting because it wasn't one that Ayn Rand shared.
Right.
She didn't care for housekeeping. She didn't care for cleaning. But she understood why Marianne Suries held it as a value. But more than that, she said, if you have a value like that, do not relinquish it. Do not apologize for it.
Right.
Do not give it up, even if you can't or can't yet fully explain why it's a value. If you know your values are rational, even if you haven't fully validated them or can't defend them against charges that they're unworthy or low, do not give them up, nor apologize for them, nor bow to pressure from others to renounce them. There's a certain kind of intellectual, usually the young and the overeager, who will drop all of his values, his favorite music, or authors, or personal style, or dress, or manner, to match what he believes a proper, rational John Galt Howard Rourke would do. And it's stories like the copper pot that help remind us that values are primary, that our goal is to live a life that is an end unto itself.
Rebecca says, good thing Amy's hats are intellectual values.
They're highly intellectual values.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that astute observation. They are. They represent a tremendous amount to me. It represents more than I could say in 5 seconds here, so yeah.
One thing I wrote down, I didn't intend to read this, but since you said you've got all those notes, I'll read all those notes, or this little bit.
Okay.
The best part of the copper pot story may be that it's Ayn Rand herself, that supposedly harsh, judgmental, unkind person, who reminds us that our personal values matter.
Yes.
Even when she didn't share the specific value. And Marianne couldn't at the moment fully explain or justify it.
Yep. Yeah, so what more do we have here? Because I actually have something to say about free will.
Tell us what you have to say about free will, because I choose to hear it.
Thank you very much for choosing to hear this. So, this is entirely separate from Robert's notes, but you'll see that there's some correlation, of course.
We live on the same planet.
We do. We live under the same reality, under the same sky. So I asked myself, when was it that I actually understood free will in myself? When was it? You know, Robert asked, where is free will? Where does it exist? What part of body? Is it your elbow that has the free will? No. And that actually gets into some other questions, which I can try to grapple with later on. But I asked myself, when was it that I discovered that I had this choice and this self-awareness to choose? And that was probably around when I was about 7 years old. And so it was kind of like awareness of my own consciousness, or awareness of my awareness. Very meta, very meta awareness, I guess. And I also understood, there was an example, there's a concept that I grasped at that time, and the concept was conscience. Not to be confused with consciousness, but conscience, this idea of this voice in your head telling you what's right and wrong. But what I took away from that concept was this idea that I can actually converse with or I can figure things out conceptually in words, what I needed to do or what I needed to figure out in my head. And that was my conscience, or my ability to think within my head. And I was pretty fascinated with that as a 7-year-old. And I kind of exercised some of this talking to myself in my head and deciding different things, choosing to do certain things. And I even discovered that I could delay gratification. I wouldn't have called it that back then, but I would do that. I would, if I was eating something delicious, I would eat it very, very slowly and really, really savor it and not just devour it. I kind of came up with this idea that, I can extend enjoyment throughout time. And, just by controlling my impatience or my desire. And I also learned eventually that I could have control over my emotions. I learned that, from my mom. She always told me if I was angry, take, 10 deep breaths. And also, if I started crying, I also learned that if I drank some water, that would calm me down. So eventually I learned that I could not only think inside my head, but I could also change my physical state, by doing something else that was physical, like deep breathing and drinking water. So this is sort of like, in philosophical speak, this is, inducing free will. How did I actually come across this when I was a child? And I do remember these specific points growing up. So, and then I figured out later on how to write down what I was thinking and feeling on paper, and I understood what introspection was, and then I realized, the fact that my emotions were caused by these ideas or experiences or these evaluations that I had in my mind that I could actually reason out, and use my conscience in that way. So when I thought about this, and I thought, okay, well, free will, what else can I say about it? So I Googled it, and if you Google using or good examples or examples of using free will, what you get is a bunch of hooey, and oftentimes it's stuff that is, trying to disavow the existence of free will, this existence of choice. And I thought to myself, hey, wait a minute. So there is another word people are using for free will instead of free will, and that is empowerment. So I looked up empowerment, and there are just, how to empower yourself, part 10, part 11, and all this stuff. And it basically talks about how to change your physical state in order to change your mental state. And to actually, take control over your emotions and take control over your thinking. And then, of course, take control over your focus. And that's what Robert was talking about in terms of coming down to that level of to focus or not is the primary choice that you have as a human being. So at that age of 7, I chose to focus. And I chose to be aware of myself and my inner workings. So there is my story.
So your option is,
Mm-hmm.
and the solution to these challenges is to take the reins,
Yes.
to focus. If the locus of free will is in the choice to focus, and then to use that focus to integrate the evidence and the knowledge and your thoughts, then when you wake up, grab the reins. And if you drop them,
Mm-hmm.
pick them back up again.
Pick them back up, dust them off, and start all over again.
We've quoted several different people on more or less the same thing, which is the problem isn't the falling down. The problem is the not getting back up.
Right.
So if you catch yourself dropping the reins, pick them up.
You've got 5 seconds.
You've got 5 seconds. Ah, so true, so true. So your homework for this week is to catch yourself being not the driver, but the passenger. The effect of your own circumstances and psychology. Catch yourself doing that. Catch any moment, any example of it. And then sit and experience that for a moment. What is that like? Don't immediately guilt yourself. Don't immediately say, oh, I'd better get in focus. Take a moment to think about it, feel it, experience it. That will give you enormous power rather than just reacting to it and say, oh, yeah, I'd better fly right.
Empower yourself.
Then empower yourself. Then take the reins
Mm-hmm.
and decide to focus and to integrate. And share it with us. Post it online
Yes.
or send us a note. Drop us a line.
Right. Go on to the Facebook page with 5 Minutes with Robert Nasir and share your story. We'd love to hear
Share
it.
an example. So today's post-it note for the week, the one I will be putting up on my bathroom mirror
Mm-hmm.
to replace the one that says written by from last week.
Yes.
I may leave that one up too because they go together. Take the reins. If you catch yourself having dropped the reins and your horse is kind of wandering around, not sure where you want him to go, pick the reins back up.
Do it. Yeah. That's
You don't
great.
want to live in the universe of Sam Harris,
No.
where rather than being the driver, see, it goes even deeper than that. If you
Yeah.
believe his idea, you're not even living a life. You are simply something that is happening. Your mind is just something that is happening. Your life is simply stuff that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be what Sam Harris thinks you are.
So sad.
No, take the reins.
Yes.
We'll be talking about this in future episodes in much smaller bites that are more focused than what we talked about today. But the challenge is, and the reason we have the big and overpriced smart water bottle, is because Amy and I
Mm-hmm.
went to
Robert
a party.
and I. Mm-hmm. We went to a party. It was a mask party.
We went
It was
to a socially distant, well-protected birthday
Yes.
party
Yes.
for my dearest and darling daughter. And as I mentioned, one of our Patreon subscribers made that possible. Well, him and his wife,
Thanks for the bratwurst,
my
Mark.
daughter's mother and stepfather.
My
and
sister
we
wife.
had a backyard party. And everybody sat 6 feet apart, and when they weren't eating, they were often wearing masks. And we did karaoke, and we had 8 different microphones, so everybody could have their own microphone. And
I did karaoke using a mask, which was really hard.
we were going to leave the party very early and get back and do our usual 6 o'clock Sunday Eastern
Yeah.
Time podcast. And we kind of fudged it by an hour. So
Yeah,
were we out of
yeah.
focus? No, we
Not
just
really.
reassessed our hierarchy of values.
We did what we could with what we had.
During challenging times, throwing a birthday party for your daughter, that's valuable.
Yes.
But so are all of you, and that's
Yes.
why we had to come back here, make this podcast happen. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks to all of you.
As always, we can't thank you enough, so we won't even try. But seriously, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And as always, I wish each of you success and flourishing and willpower, especially lots of willpower, because you've only got 5 seconds to exercise it. And love.